Today I'm going to talk about the top 5 content or content makers that really red-pilled me, woke me up. The first one I'd say is Vigilant Citizen. Vigilant Citizen is a blog. I started reading it in 2017, and I can't really track how I found it or what. I really can't. I was kind of, the thing about that time was I was already kind of in this really kind of depressed and kind of that feeling when you're kind of betrayed and you're knowing you have to make a change and you're just kind of you've already confronted a lot of cognitive dissonance in your personal relationships that you've had. And so for some reason you're attracted to other like waves of cognitive dissonance that kind of throw you in a loop. And this site, Vigilant Citizen, absolutely threw me in a loop because, and they have an article called The Introduction or History of Mass Media. They identify that as start here first, and I think that's exactly right. And then this is a man who worked in the music industry, and so he lays out especially music videos and the typical, symbols and a lot of that kind of occult, esoteric symbols and that kind of predictive programming. And then he also lays out MK Ultra mind control. So he lays out a lot of those aspects focused on the media. And since I was completely, and I mean media in terms of especially pop music, and sometimes TV shows and movies, but he's pretty music focused because he was in that industry. And then he also focuses really just on that kind of, how these kind of occult groups have to show and present their symbology, their symbols, and their themes and their agendas because they believe that they'll avoid karma by being, technically they're disclosing it, right? At least he gets into that. He is far more well-versed in this, so definitely check out the blog, Vigilant Citizen. It woke me up, I'd say definitely not all at once. It didn't just bang me in the head. I was very resistant to believing it for really years. I'm confronted with undeniable speculation and proof and truth all at once, because it's like my mind kind of wanted to scramble it into resisting it and not believing it, especially when it came to the practice of trauma-based mind control, MK Ultra mind control, and especially his article about how Marilyn Monroe on there, and also Britney Spears, when he taught all of that, it was such a huge awakening for me, and it wasn't pleasant at all. I was so just overwhelmingly miserable and paranoid. I had horrible dreams at that time. I was cat sitting for a friend, and I remember how I was so comforted by the cat because I was really absorbed in that Vigilant Citizen. So I do recommend it. Is definitely going down a rabbit hole and not feeling good about the world and feeling terrified, because trauma-based mind control is not it's really hard to absorb, but then and I still have resisted to his because see, the thing about him is, even though I think that he raises very astute observations, he has his own confirmation bias that comes through. Because see, then he started analyzing like Taylor Swift and Lana Del Rey, and this is probably because I like them the best, that I was so resistant to believing that they also were taken with the MK Ultra mind control. But then at the same time, the thing that defines MK Ultra mind control is the fracturing of the mind. So you're disassociating, you have different personalities carrying out different things, so you don't remember. So your core self won't know. So the point is I don't know. I still have cognitive dissonance and resistance to some of the things he brings up, but then I have absolute like, wow, this is the truth, this is fascinating. And so I just recommend exposing yourself to it. It opens up this door. It has different categories too. Like, I was very interested in certain categories, but the Denver airport category was another huge, because you truly don't understand what these murals are doing in an airport. What do they have to do with anything? And the construction of the Denver airport. I have people who I know very well who have lived in Denver and have worked as pilots and really know that system. So I'm aware of certain elements of that airport that are already very strange and shady. And so his article about that was interesting. And he's a very astute observer. He has a great grasp of esoteric and occult knowledge. And it's just refreshing too to just hear a take that's kind of just breaking down and dissecting and analyzing things that we really have never been exposed to in our life. I mean, we just kind of have very certain lenses that are, when you learn how to look at movies, TV, and art, you really are exposed to, I've always been in filmmaking classes. I've been in kind of the writer, the Joseph Campbell journey. I've had a lot of different lenses. Even the lenses of the typical, like what millennials love is like the sexist lens and the heteronormative and all that, and the anti-colonial. All those lenses are over the top. But this is a lens about actually occult and ancient, really, symbols that are worked into the media. And it's a huge, I definitely recommend. Check that out. That was what was waking me up, and I was, again, the process of waking up, I'd say, isn't just one baby. Someone doesn't just, at least for me, someone didn't just like pour some like water on me, a bucket of water, and then I was there. I was kind of, it was very push-pull resistant. I was not ready to hear some of it. I was ready to hear some more, and then because I had that in my consciousness as a possibility, I started seeing more of it. And then I just had I think the more lenses and perspectives you have to view the world, you start to see which ones are really predominant and which ones are manufactured, right? And so some lenses are just manufactured because they know this about the human brain, is once we're exposed to something and then we have it repeated, then we start to be like, well, this is true, right? So anyway, I think that was a huge wake-up call for me. I'd say the second thing that woke me up, and this is not just waking up on spiritual, this is some of these are also kind of down-to-earth people that are not in that spiritual, occult, esoteric type of lens, but some of these lenses are going to be just waking up to the political and the media lies, right? So the next thing I was exposed to was the Rubin Report, which is simply a gay man who left the left at the time I watched him, he hadn't left the left. He was just trying to say that the left is becoming very authoritarian and he's worried, right? So he was having all these interviews and conversations with people. He aims to talk to people on both sides of the aisle and all around the nuance, like in between. He talks to libertarians. He used to talk to more lefties, a lot of, and then he talks to people on the right. He talks to just also people that don't identify as any label, right? And so his show woke me up because, for one, he was not trying to propagate a narrative other than the narrative of, hey, I'm kind of worried about how the left has gotten I'm worried about how they're getting very authoritarian in the college campuses. I'm worried how they're getting this way in media, and I'm worried how they're constantly having the same types of lenses that are really divisive, right? And then they're saying that there's, he was just having a conversation that was like, hey, I'm gay, and I'm also tired of being told by the left that I'm kind of like this prop for them, and I feel as though there's this kind of using. He talks about the oppression Olympics and how there's kind of this using victimhood in order to have power and control, or in order to kind of, it's a manipulative strategy. And so he really woke me up to the fact that because there was almost like this feeling I had of like unacceptable belief, and we're really rigid with the idea of T is a racist and then the right is racist by default, like of course is the kind of thing. And so that show woke me up, and then that actually led to me finding all sorts of other speakers on it who then went on to become some of my favorite people, not only as a wake-up call, but just as some really excellent resources. And from the Rubin Report, I found Scott Adams, who has written several books, including How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big, and then he wrote a book called Win Bigly, which is about the election. And so, the 2016 one, I mean. And so those two books were, and then recently he came out with one called Loser Think. But at the time when I discovered Rubin, he had those other two books, and he's the comic of Dilbert. But he was somebody that had the original 2 movies, 1 screen, and The Cognitive Dissonance. And he had such a wonderful, concise description of that really hit home, and it was so well said. And his books are so, again, they're also extremely astute with psychological phenomenon reduced in layperson's terms, and just he's got such a kind of genial, bemused kind of voice that comes through not only when he's speaking but also in his writing. And so Rubin Report exposed me to Scott Adams, and then I watched Coffee with Scott Adams every morning. And there's plenty of things that I kind of get annoyed with him as well, but I'm so interested and invigorated by his point of view. It's very interesting because he has that point of view of looking at both sides and speculating and thinking about what both of them are doing wrong and what kind of blind spots both of them have. And then he was such a weight. He's his own little red pill, but he's really within the Rubin Report. And then, of course, Candace Owens on the Rubin Report was an even bigger red pill. She was called Red Pill Black, and she was on the Rubin show, and the title was, Why I Left the Left, or something to that nature. So that video, absolutely huge part of me waking up to elements, and these were all more political. These weren't waking up in the spiritual way, but they all start to intersect in an interesting way. And so this is all 2017, what I was exposed to. So, and even then I was still kind of, it was like I was afraid even to be watching this stuff, even though I was aware they were extremely, like, compassionate, empathic, Dave Rubin, just watch Rubin Report. Now he does direct messages now, and it's just him, no guests, because he kind of now does interviews, but also his own. And you watch him, and he is you can't fake the level of empathy and compassion and just good-natured, even-keeled, kind-hearted type of quality soul person he is. And so, that was so key, because I was told that is the opposite. And Scott's a similar way, except Scott has a bit of a defensiveness that comes in, and then he sometimes he'll just be deleting people off his Periscope, and so there's elements of him that, is human. Everyone's human. But anyway, so that was all 2017, and then let's think of some other. Those are the first 2 bits of content that were a part of waking up. And then I'm just going to kind of fast forward. Well, I'm not going to fast forward too much. Okay, so another element of waking up was, again, the Rubin Report had Lindsay Shepard. Lindsay Shepard was a TA who got in trouble for showing a Jordan Peterson clip in class, and then so that catapulted me to Jordan Peterson, who I'm going to say is number 3, because Jordan Peterson is an intellectual powerhouse. He is the most eloquent professor and speaker that will wake you up to the authoritarianism, the totalitarianism, and the psychology. So because he's introduced, he goes over Carl Jung, he goes over the Gulag, that book. He goes over, I can't say it, but he goes over. He has literature, and he has dystopia, and he has psychology, and he's a professor of the classics. He has religion. He puts it all in the perspective. He gets philosophical, psychological, on the myth and literature side, all of those, and can have absolute just epiphany, constant revelatory, epiphany-inducing content, right? And where do we find? So I just found him from this because I was like, I wanted to follow exactly what happened with him, and he lays out why he doesn't want to have compelled speech in part of a law. It has nothing to do with him being a bigot, but it has to do with him believing that is a slippery slope down a totalitarian regime, because people can say, well, people can infer that you have that if you forgot saying a certain element of speech, that means that you are against them. And there's so much subjectivity and inference and kind of mind reading to it. There's not an objectivity that, and so he was just criticizing the nature of how the law was written, very vague, and doesn't open up these kinds of issues that would come up. And so honestly, he breaks down his entire argument in a separate video on his page. So he's a huge speaker on, that's what woke everybody up to him, but he actually has all his lectures. He's a Canadian professor. He has all his lectures online. He's also taught at Harvard as well. But he has all his lectures online from classes, and he kind of goes over, the meaning. He has one about like behavior, personality, the formation of personality, mind. That's very psychological. And that one is amazing because it works in historical events, literature, and psychology. And that's what I was saying, he has such, just a brilliant way of making these connections and analyzing this and then saying it very clearly, but also just, his mind is just, he's truly like an intellectual philosopher of our time. And so his classes are great. Another one is meaning of, I can't remember the names of it, they're all broken down on his channel. So those all open me up, because those open me up to having this contextual and just brilliantly told knowledge that kind of breaks down the current postmodern Marxism and just this kind of identity politics, political correctness. He really has such just very insightful points about all of this stuff. Because he started right once after the Lindsay Shepard, not after the Lindsay Shepard thing, but he started making YouTube videos and offering advice also. So his advice centers on accountability and responsibility and the empowerment that gives. And then he went on to write a book, which, to be honest, I got his book and I got it as an audiobook. But hearing him out loud is somehow and I'll have to give it a try again, because I think his videos, I just am way more, I'm far more, I follow them just really well. And I also like when he debates or goes on interview shows. Like there's a famous one where he went on a Canadian news show, and there's just, honestly just, this could go on forever. I could just keep going down new forests with Jordan Peterson, just as I went down with Rubin, because he's again, when you get a red pill figure or content, they just kind of burst you open with all kinds of other branches and water and fire in you, because you're just like, wow, there's so much to be gleaned from this and gained, and I'm just getting so many perspectives, and there's so much enriching, helpful content that's not only waking me up, but also making me see the world with just another fresh lens, fresh perspective. All right. So he's number 3. And so then, who else are we getting into? My other content that woke me up. Now, I would say the other content that woke me up, we're going to fast forward. We're going to go into the current time because I really want to get to some people that have further woken me up. And because this is such an influence on me right now, I just have to say. So number 4 is a man named Jason Christoff. Now, he is a kind of health and nutrition coach as well as a self-sabotage coach. And he actually goes into how self-sabotage plays into health and nutrition. But he is very astute and very psychologically based. But he's very much a person that red pills you because his content on what's going on, what started in 2020 and has continued now, is completely mind-blowingly really revelatory. And is revelatory because it's, of course, not anywhere else except in other, equally red pill people. But it's he has a podcast called The Psychology of Freedom on Soundcloud. Okay, that's what I found him. I found him on Instagram, and I saw that a holistic sex coach that I really like, Kim and Nami, had liked one of his posts. And then because I really love her, and I really love her point of view and content and perspective, and I just love, I already love her. So I saw that she liked him, and then I found his podcast, and that has been just waves of, and then I signed up for his self-sabotage seminars, and then I've gotten to watch his 2018, 2019, and then he's going to have 2020. So I've absorbed really not only his podcasts, but his in-person lectures all about self-sabotage that have woken me up. They've woken me up they've woken me up on an individual level and collective level, because he kind of is like the Vigilant Citizen kind of thing, where he does talk about the kind of cabal type of stuff. And then he also has the emphasis on the thing that's been going on in 2020 and now, which, the thing this and why we're putting this right? So he has a perspective on, the so-called diagnostic test, how it's not diagnostic. And he goes into it so many levels on that Jordan Peterson level, where he can bring in this contextual and historical, and then the media focus as well. And so so Psychology of Freedom, Jason Christoff. That's his main content is that podcast. That's free. And then if you really want to go nerd out, you can get his class, his seminars. And those, I'm going to be in one at the end of the month in January too, that is more self-sabotage, but I think he's just, it's so illuminating to every aspect of the present, and he offers so much value because he also offers value on you hacking your subconscious, and he also offers value on you kind of getting ready for possible scary events and getting your financial situation. He started as a layperson that had to learn a bunch of financial stuff, so he can really add value to helping you in that way. And now, even though I mentioned him, he's kind of my current really obsession, really red pilling me. But my last one is actually going to be that I would say it was right in April of 2020 when I watched this, right in lockdown. And it's not necessarily, it's probably going to be derided, but it is that Fall Cabal documentary mixed with the Out of the Shadows one, and kind of the compilation of the conversation about those two documentaries and other elements. But the Fall Cabal documentary is so laid out, and yes, there's an element to the music and to the way it's presented that is, it kind of makes you feel terrified and paranoid. I mean, it's kind of like when you go too far down you're in such a dark place because you're watching kind of this veil being lifted that's pretty intense But nonetheless, it's illuminating, even though a lot of aspects I do think seem really crazy, and so that they kind of strain the credibility, I'd say. But at the same time, you still think it does wake you up to other aspects that just really red pill you. And so it's a recommendation because it just... And you know what? I'm going to throw in one more documentary on that. Okay, so besides Cabal and Out of the Shadows, I really want to throw in Hoaxed, because that's about the kind of, that's more about the focused on the media, but it's very eye-opening. It's a red pill, but it's also not like red pilling you in a way where you're thinking about sacrifice and really awful sexual deviance. It's kind of run-of-the-mill, media is corrupt. So that, I'm going to throw in that. And so those are the five content things that red pilled me. I'm just going to say very briefly at the end, another thing that has red pilled me is honestly conversations with real life people who have been sexually abused. I used to live in LA, and I know a friend of mine who is writing a book about her really serious a mix of the kind of grooming, mind control, and sexual abuse. And so she red pilled me because she's someone I know, and I read her entire memoir about it and talked to her. So that's a huge part that makes all these other content channels really kind of drives home. And anyway, so I hope that in your journey you seek these out, that you might already be familiar with all of them and might have more. And if that's the case, I would love to hear content that red pilled you. So please put it in the comments and feel free to share, because I really love actually the process of constantly being exposed to new perspectives and these kind of revelatory analyses and epiphanies. And sometimes, yes, they're dark, and sometimes they put me in a bad, paranoid, weird place. But other times they really empower me and get me, like, the truth will piss you off and then set you free, as they say. And I think that's kind of the stages you go through. And yeah, and I hate to even reduce it to these five, because I'd say there's so many branches of other people I found through it, because I feel like I was remiss in not mentioning Teal Swan, because see, she was also a victim of ritualistic abuse, which fit into all kinds of stuff I had already read on Vigilant Citizen and from my friend who's writing the book, as I've mentioned. And so see, it's like once you've exposed yourself to that level, you start to come in contact with more and make these connections. And then it actually affirms that, wow, there's actually a lot of people that have had this horrible types of abuse, and so or been in this kind of mind control and or speaking out about it indirectly or directly. And then you just start realizing, wow, there's all kinds of people who have been red pilled and are see it. It's actually a huge group of people. And the more you talk about it, the more you get exposed. You find other people that have also had these revelations and worries and concerns and paranoia and epiphanies, and then it just keeps going. And so, yeah, I hate to be remiss in not mentioning people, but I would say that those are the top five that I'm on the top of my mind. And I hope that this was a helpful resource of value to you. Thank you.